start with names in the fashion that we often do or have done for a long time. But I wanted to say a couple things about that before we did. So this is a custom of Buddha Eye Temple where a person will say their name and then the whole assembly says their name back. And we go around the room doing that. I realize for some of you that's intimidating. And that's also a little bit why we do it. Because there's oftentimes this little bit of a film that we have that we're a little reserved. And there's this film of separation. And so this is just a very simple way to join the community for this teaching and to take that film away in a very kind of gentle way. It's not meant to expose you or create some kind of difficulty, but just to have that kind of sense of collectiveness. And when you're doing this, there's a part where you're saying your name, and then you're saying everyone else's name. You're not going to remember everyone's name. You're not that good. But you could be better than not remembering anyone's name. Okay, so if there's somebody that you go, oh, that's their name. I've been trying to remember their name. Oh, that's their name. Then it can just hopefully stick. And then maybe afterwards you go talk with them when we're having coffee time. And maybe you don't remember their name at that time. And you say, oh, I thought I had your name, but I forgot it. What's your name? And then that builds a kind of cohesion in the sangha that's really helpful. So I'm the Hojo. Let's start with Kose. Yose. Darren. Jacqueline. Anyu. Genki. Kise. Lily. April. Oma. Miranda. Colin. Thomas. Anshin. Joshin. Joichi. Kogan. Shanae. GPA. Susan. Chico. Shafi. David. Josiah. Emma. Ren. Tojun. Alexis. Dustin. Prempreet. Moxie. Sokai. Mario. KGN. John. Eider. Kirk. Issei. June. Suiho. Jeff. Christopher. Shinyu. Myowan. Amber. Satoko. Jackie. Josh. Jane. Anshin. Jushin. Will. Paul. Alita. Shuho. Sagan. Genshin. Cat. Carrie. Francis. Esho. Jokai. Iso. Karuna. Eric. Oliver. Kathy. Good morning. And a thanks to Joichi for suggesting we start on this side. Because always the person who's sitting where Kosei is sitting does the audio, so they know it's coming. But sometimes on this side, if you're new and then someone's pointing at you saying, say your name, then it's a little bit intimidating. So finally, Joichi, after how many years? A long time. How about we start on that side? Thank you. Also, I forgot to mention that many of us have Dharma names, which are names that people receive when they receive precepts, and oftentimes people go by those names while they're at the temple. So you might even know someone's name out in the rest of the world, and then you come to the temple and there's a different name, and the names are not names that typically we're familiar with. So when we say the names like this, it helps everybody get used to your Dharma name as well. So today I'm going to start the second talk on the Diamond Sutra, or the diamond that cuts through delusion sutra. And last week, I was saying that the sutra, this title, oftentimes is just translated as the Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Prajnaparamita Sutra, or the Diamond of Perfect Wisdom Sutra, is a little more full translation. Another way to translate the title, particularly if you look at the Sanskrit versions, would be the Diamond that Cuts Through Delusion Sutra, or the Diamond that Cuts Through Delusion Perfect Wisdom Sutra. That's kind of the... there's actually a couple titles that are a little bit longer, but that's kind of the full title, and that we can understand this diamond in at least two different ways. One of the ways that it's presented is a diamond is so hard it's indestructible, and the indestructible quality of that diamond is the same as wisdom, or the perfect wisdom of the Buddhas, that it is uncrushable. The other way that the diamond is used is that the diamond can cut through anything. So that's the other way that people might think about what the diamond means. Indestructible and cutting through delusion, and itself not having the capacity to be rendered in any way. And I had mentioned that one way we can think about indestructible is not just the kind of hardness of the diamond, but also the clarity of the diamond. That the diamond is a symbol for the living body of awakening. That everything that we touch, everything we experience, everything we are, everything the world is actually a living body of the Buddha, or a living body of the awakened one. And that the Diamond Sutra is trying to get us to see with the eyes that can align or orient in that understanding. Not just as some kind of abstract truth, but as the very way that we experience the world and live. So the indestructibility is also about the wholeness of things. Everything's involved. And I gave those two images of the image of the mirror, or the image of the self-illuminating jewel. That also shows up in Buddhist teachings a lot. If you think of a beautiful jewel that is just full of its own light. This jewel has no edge, actually. So it's just illuminating itself. Or like a mirror that has no edge, which is just reflecting itself consistently. So that's the side of the diamond that's like the indestructible. And then that has the capacity to cut through delusion. Delusion meaning like one-sided adherence to views. Sometimes we talk, there's an interesting phrase in Chinese called plank view. And the image comes from, if you have a big board, let's say you had like a 2x10, and you're carrying it on your shoulder, it's kind of heavy, and it's a plank, right? And so you can only see half. Right? So that idea that we hold on to the one half and we forget about the other. Well, the trick about that is, I don't know if you've noticed, but you always have a plank. What's behind you and what's in front of you. You don't even need to put a 2x10 on your shoulder to be kind of attached to one side or the other, attached to the side that can be seen, can be verified, can be enacted, encountered, right? And then all of this world, which is the unseen, or the something you can't just manipulate. We forget all about it. So let me read again the first chapter of the Diamond Sutra. It's very short. And as I mentioned last week, there are many commentators which consider this to be the Diamond Sutra and the rest of the Diamond Sutra, the other 31 chapters, to be commentary on this. The reason of the assembly. Thus have I heard. Once the Buddha was staying in Anathapindada's park at Jeddah Grove in Shravasti, with a community of 1,250 monks. When it was mealtime, the world-honored one put on his robe, took his alms bowl, and went into the great city of Shravasti, going from house to house to beg for food. This done, he returned to his abiding place, finished the meal, put away his robe and bowl, washed his feet, arranged his seat, and sat down. So for a monk or for a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, this is all very ordinary life. Dwelling in a monastic enclosure or a renunciate community. This would have been during a retreat of some kind. And meditating throughout the morning. And then sometime in the late morning or mid-morning, putting on your robe, taking your bowl, walking into the nearby city. These places were always located by a town or city somewhere, not right in the middle, but usually right on the outskirts. Going from door to door, offering some sutras, receiving food. Most of the translations say beg. I don't really like the word beg. Alms is a better word, but we don't have so many good words in English for it. So begging is how many of the translations are. So receiving food, actually the monk showing up at your door is as much a gift of the monk to you as it is whatever you may offer the monk. So the showing up with the empty bowl is the gift or the generosity of the monk. You offering the food is the generosity of the almsgiving, and in that there is great merit. That's the understanding of that kind of practice. Returning to the community, everyone would eat. Usually what has been received would all be put together, and then each would take a portion and eat. When you're finished washing the bowl, putting it away, folding up your robe, and then sitting down. And that's usually the time that the Buddha would give a teaching. So there'd be a kind of appointed seat where the Buddha would sit and then give some instruction to the assembly. So what's striking to me about this is how straightforward it is. I think most of us long for a straightforward way of living. I would also say a kind of true way of living. Very few of us would become renunciates like the Buddha and the community that was gathered around him here at the time of the Diamond Sutra. But we still have a very similar aim. What would it mean to live a life that is really honest? Unencumbered by a kind of divisiveness of your own heart. And to just be present in the way that the Buddha shows up in this beginning of the sutra. Now, to do that, it takes a great effort. But we make a mistake in that we get an image of what we think the straightforward or upright life would look like. I love in the Lotus Sutra, it says upright, gentle, and sincere. Those are the qualities of the Bodhisattva which can see the Buddha. Upright, gentle, and sincere. It's really nice. So oftentimes we will create a kind of image in our head of what does upright, gentle, and sincere look like. And the way that we go about trying to live that type of life, that straightforward, true way to live, is to try to adhere to that image. And so what the Buddha is presenting us here in this first chapter is something much more profound than just the marks of a Buddha's life, like the attributes of a Buddha's life. You can see something and you can be inspired by it, but if we just try to adhere to it in a like making the shape of it sort of way, it's really impossible. And we could think about meditation practice, but just broadly speaking, the practice of Buddhism, of receiving and employing the teachings in our life in some way, as always coming back to this conundrum. I can see something, I can know something true about it and head towards it, but as I do that, I inevitably make some kind of mistake. And the mistake is that I try to adhere to what I think it looks like, as opposed to doing the fundamental work that allows it to look that way. So the great effort that we need to make is not a great effort in sculpting something. It's a great effort, we can invert the words. It's an effort of greatness. We're making an effort towards great. or making an effort towards the wholeness of things, or making an effort towards that great round mirror, that edgeless mirror, or that self-illuminating jewel that the Diamond Sutra is calling our attention to. That really the way that we're talking about is unfabricated. When it's fabricated, it always, it can't be true. The conditions change, and then it's no longer a true way of living, and we're holding on to this old thing. That it being unfabricated means that it always has the potential to respond. When we think about this in the way we sit zazen, it's not complicated to sit and be quiet, to be upright, to be gentle with the world and with yourself. And by gentle, I don't mean just like meek. I mean like fully present in your power, but not forcing things around, and sincere. That's a very uncomplicated thing. And yet, it's almost impossible to do. So meditation practice, for example, there's a great effort in it, but it's not an effort into becoming the best or whatever you think it is that you're going to become through the most controlled. I think that's the kind of one of the most toxic ones, the most clear, etc. But you have to do the actual work of clearing. You have to do the work of simplifying. And that work should always be towards this kind of unfabricatedness, a great, like an effort in a direction of non-effort, we could say. Now, really, to live this life in a true way, we have to face the totality of it. We have to face the wholeness. And while that can sound good, that can be very difficult, because the wholeness includes all kinds of things which are also not so easy to look at. Bodhidharma, the first ancestor of the Zen school in China, said to have sat facing a wall for 9 years. And this becomes a great symbol within our tradition. What wall are you sitting up against? It's your own. It's your own cliff. You can't avoid it. But mostly, we don't realize that's what we're doing. And the cliff goes in all directions, forever. There's no getting around it, right? Actually, I hear if you go, I haven't been there, but I hear if you go, people are a little disappointed it's smaller than they thought. Right? But that was a Bodhidharma's cliff, right? And he knew that there's no getting around it. He had traveled from India at the prophecy that his teacher had given, and he went, but he knew he couldn't get around it. He couldn't get around this jewel, this unbreakable cliff, which is also where the cutting through can happen. When we're facing things wholly, then that's where the cutting's possible, like that mirror and the sword. It's really about a different way of seeing. And this can happen in really profound ways, where your whole life is just completely changed. And it can happen in very simple ways that you think don't change your whole life, but actually they do. So, one story I have about an instance in my own life that corresponds with this was when I was a novice monk, and I was living close to my teacher's temple with my family, and our oldest daughter was, I think she was maybe 5, and then our second daughter was a baby, and our good friend's mother had passed away from breast cancer, and so I went to the funeral, and it was actually, I went to the wake, And it was off in another city that's kind of close to Sendai, where my teacher's temple is and my wife's family's from. And so we had to take this long, it was maybe a couple hour car ride, and I went with a group of my friends. Now my best friends in Japan are not monks, they're motorcycle demons. They're, by Japanese standard, they're quite rough. And so we went in one of the friends' car, and it was a motley crew of tattoos, and which are very common here in Japan, not so much. And we're going, and on the way back, and everyone except for me and hopefully the driver was relatively drunk. That's what happens at a wake. Is people, there's a ceremony happens and then people drink. And we stopped at a parking area, what do you call that, a rest stop, so people could go to the bathroom. And this dog appeared. And the dog was just going from person to person to person, and asking for, food, attention, food, who knows, whatever. And so we decided collectively, I don't know who the we was exactly, that this dog needed saved. And so we got the dog in the car along with this kind of motley drunken crew. And we drove back into Sendai to my friend's house, and then I was going to head back home. And everyone was like, well, what are we going to do with the dog? And being the foolish type that I am, I took the dog. So we named this dog Shiro. The dog was kind of brown, but when we washed her, turned out she was white. And white means Shiro means white in Japanese. And so so the dog was living with us for a while, and I really was learning about what it means to take responsibility for our life. I was already a father, so I knew something about that, but this was like, okay, I don't exactly want to save this dog, but I kind of, now I'm obligated, and what do I do with the dog? As you could imagine what the situation was. So the dog at night would howl because it was lonely. And the Japanese houses, at least especially the house we lived in, was a very old type Japanese house. You can't really have dogs inside. I mean, people don't. I mean, they do now modern days a little bit, but they're very kind of, the dogs that are sort of made to be that way, or bred to be that way. But this dog was definitely not the inside type of dog, and our house wasn't one that really could be inside, and we were renting, etc. So the dog would sleep outside. We had a warm area for it and everything, but it would just howl. Oh gosh, baby. People sometimes complain about sleep deprivation in the monastery, and I'm like, if you've had children, there's another kind of sleep deprivation. But anyway, so we'd howl in the middle of the night, and waking up the neighbors. And then one night I took it up. I was trying to do something about it, just going out of my mind, but not quite willing to face the situation. You know how that is? There's something difficult, and you're just kind of holding yourself back a little bit, and you're putting tons of effort into it, but it's not really working. And I remember one day I took the dog up and put him in my van, which where we lived, it was kind of maybe 30 yards up on this parking area, and we put him there. And I know it was great; no one could hear him, and I think she quieted down. But then I went to get in the van the next morning; it was completely covered in poo. And so I was like, maybe that's not going to work. Anyway, so you get the idea. And I was tired. I was working, raising kids, practicing at the temple every day, every morning, early, and this dog was just the thing that kind of was pushing me over the edge. So I was calling my friends to try to get them to take the dog, because they were sort of the ones that were instigators about saving the dog, but they were like, no, can't do it, I don't know what to do. And so one night, and in the tiredness, this is something I was really working with, because getting up very early in the morning every day to practice for hours is not easy. And so I was right at that kind of place in my practice where the tiredness was just really overwhelming. And one day the dog was doing it again. We're going to bed, and was howling. And just at my wit's end, I remember grabbing this piece of cardboard and going outside and putting it on the ground and laying down with the dog. And we just slept. And I got up in the morning, and I wasn't tired. I went to practice, and it was like something just changed. It just flipped. I'm not telling you this story because doing the most hardcore thing will always flip this for you. And it wasn't that I didn't try to become the person who was going to save the dog or be the person who slept with the dog or whatever. And I certainly was going to sleep with the dog night after night after night. But what happened in that moment, in facing the actuality of the situation, the totality of that, it's like this different movement happened. I can't even say it was my doing exactly. It really came from kind of giving up. And since that day, tiredness is a totally different thing for me. This was almost 30 years ago. I get tired, but that kind of tiredness, which is that kind of resistance, really allowed me to see something in a different way. Now again, I don't bring this up to make such a big deal about myself, but about you looking for the places where something like that's happened. When have you shifted from that kind of distance to actually facing the wall of the situation, not trying to look past the wall towards the solution and only throwing your energy towards the way you want it to be, but actually facing what's there? And how has that changed your life? I know everybody here has done that. What is that? That's part of what the Diamond Sutra, or I could say what the Diamond Sutra is trying to encourage us to do. Now, Subhuti's question, which is chapter 2. Then the elder Subhuti in the assembly arose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, knelt on his right knee with his palms joined, and respectfully addressed the Buddha. How remarkable, world-honored one, that the Tathagata is ever mindful of bodhisattvas, protecting and instructing them well. World-honored one, when good men and good women resolve to attain unsurpassed complete enlightenment, how should they abide in their mind, and how should they subdue their thoughts? That's the first half of the second chapter. So a couple things to notice here. What's the posture of Subhuti's questioning? I talked a little bit last week about who Subhuti was. He was the foremost of the practice of loving kindness in the assembly. And so he comes forward to ask this question, but how does he do it? He doesn't just say, hey Buddha, da-da-da-da-da-da, or he doesn't make a strong assertion about what's true and then ask the Buddha to tell him if it's right or not. Right? He comes forward, he bears his right shoulder. You'll see people who wear kesa, it's always tied this way to bear the right shoulder. That's a symbol of being willing to carry the weight. Okay? So you bear the right shoulder as a sign of respect. This was pre-Buddhist. This is South Asian cultural thing. He puts his right knee to the ground and puts his hands in front of him like this. So he's in this posture of receptivity, in the posture of facing the wholeness, of facing the diamond, and then preparing himself to receive what cuts through delusion. He's not in the shadow of the Buddha. This is really important. Oftentimes people think I'm going to study Buddhism, I study underneath a teacher or some teaching, and that again we're trying to emulate what that teacher's doing in a kind of rigid way, but that's not the point. Actually, if a teacher's doing their job well, you're becoming yourself. You're not becoming them. That's really important. And that you're facing the causes and conditions of your own life in a way in which you're becoming more and more and more yourself as you're walking the path. That can get confusing. Of course, we try to emulate people that we admire or respect. That's good. Do it. Try to emulate them. See how it is. But don't just try to hold on to the shape. Find out how it's really true to you. And how it's really true to you will then allow you to find your own expression of it. So this is the case with Subhuti. And then he says, how rare, how remarkable that you, the Buddha, the awakened one, are ever mindful, protective, and instructive to bodhisattvas. What a miracle that is. That this being who has reached the pinnacle of gentleness, uprightness, and caring would just meet the bodhisattvas and give them instruction and live with them and eat with them. That's like Subhuti is really recognizing what a precious thing, what a rare thing. And we all receiving that too. That the Buddha's awakening is not something which is distant. It is right here. In a practical sense, that's carried in the lineage that has been passed down 2,500 years ago, from 2,500 years ago to today, that the tradition continues to be cultivated and we continue to gather to hear the teachings and to practice the teachings. And the Buddha is present in that. Present as the lineage holders, but present simply as the light of awakening itself. But notice here that Subhuti says that they're ever mindful of the bodhisattvas. This is an important thing to notice in the sutra. What is a bodhisattva? It's a being that's given rise to the thought of awakening. But not just to any kind of awakening, total and complete awakening, which includes all beings. So a bodhisattva vows to not cross over into the world of the end of suffering until all beings can cross over into the world of the end of suffering, or nirvana. That's the kind of operational definition of a bodhisattva. They're not out for just their own spiritual awakening. Whatever could be their own true and complete spiritual awakening would be the true spiritual awakening of all beings. And not just all human beings, but all types of beings. And this is a little clue to where the sutra is headed. Notice it starts out with an assembly of 1,250 monks. It's not where it ends up. And in this path of the bodhisattva, there's a conundrum, and Subhuti calls it out. He says, for good men and good women who give rise to the thought of total and complete awakening, anuttara samyak sambodhi, that's how it's said in Japanese. Anuttara samyak sambodhi is how it's said in Sanskrit. Not great pronunciation, but so for beings who have given rise to that type of a thought of awakening, that's what really inspires me. That's what I know to be true. It's not just about me, it's about everything. Then where should we put our minds? And how should we control this mind? You see why that's a kind of a conundrum? If all beings are going to be included, how could you choose any place to abide? If you put your attention here, said, well, this is the important thing, and if this being important means that these things over here are not important, then you're not attending to the wholeness of things. If you decide, oh, well, this is unimportant, this is unimportant, this is unimportant, this is important, this is important, this, and I'm going to try to keep my mind on that, I'm going to control my mind to keep it on that thing, then I'm already sowing the seeds of delusion, which cause a problem in the first place. So this kind of conundrum for the bodhisattva, Subhuti is wise to call it out. Now imagine that he's in the company of great arhats. An arhat is another path, a path in which we dry up all of the hindrances, conventionally usually defined as objects of desire. And these are great beings, great spiritual beings. But here Subhuti is seeing, because he's the foremost in loving kindness, what about all these other beings that are suffering? What is the significance of an arhat for all of these beings that are suffering? There is a significance of the arhat for them. But what is it? Because that's what I'm concerned about as a bodhisattva. Where should we take where should we make our life? What should be at the center of it? And how will we control the mind that is out of control? Now, as I mentioned last week, I really don't like this word subdue. It doesn't fit in with my map. And I was also using that as an example of why it's important to have a long relationship with a sutra and not to just interpret it into your lexicon. Okay, lexicon's like your system of words that make sense to you. And usually when we're trying to understand something, we interpret it into our own system of words. Right? Totally fine. But if you have a long relationship with a sutra or text or teaching, if you really pay attention to the words that are there and face them like Bodhidharma faced the cliff, don't just try to get around them with a convenient explanation, they will mess with you. And as they mess with you, they will start cutting things away and through things. And that's one of the things. So for me currently, one of the words in the sutra I'm really working with is this word subdue. Yeah, don't like it. I don't want to subdue minds. Right? But I also realize that my mind is pretty out there and pretty deluded and pretty given to flights of all kinds of problematic patterns. Self-righteousness is one of the big ones. I don't know for you, it might be something else. For me that is. So what does it mean to subdue that? Am I just going to crush it? Because that's how I understand subdue. If you go back to the Chinese characters, it's kind of interesting. This word is made of two characters. The first character means something like to put down, like to take from a high place. Right? Decenter, maybe, would be an implication of that. Not to have it be, well, of course, that's what I'm thinking, so that must be what's true. How radical is that? Don't believe everything you think. Did you ever see that bumper sticker? It's kind of nice. Don't believe everything you think. You got to believe some things you think, but probably not everything. So that's the first one. And that's a little bit different than like crushing, right? It's just like, just take it down from that high place. And then the second character, which does mean something like putting your face down to the ground or looking down in subservience. If you look into the origins of the character, it's kind of interesting. It's made up of two parts. One side of the character means a human, and the other side of the character means dog. And some explanation of the origin of this is that it came from the observation of, humans been living together with dogs for a very long time, like Shiva, and that it came from the image of the dog just being right behind the human that's living with. It's, I guess we would say, owner. And that when the owner goes places, the dog is just right there. Its face is completely ready to be present. And I'm looking at the faces of people I know who are dog lovers, and that's the case, right? They're just right there. And that origins of that character is not how do we squish something, but who's going to lead? What's going to be the leader in that situation? Now, I'm not saying the humans are always the better leaders than the dogs. I'm just saying that's the origin of the character. But if we try to think about what this meaning of subdue, to take something down from that kind of high position, which we've just invested it with all of our idea of what might be true, our mind, our thoughts, and then to say, do I want that to be the thing that I'm just pressed up against, following it wherever it goes? Or would it be better for it to follow this? My right knee on the ground, my right shoulder exposed, and hands together in reverence. So that's another way to think about subdue. I'm not crushing. I'm just asking this thing to not be the leader. And I'm not even saying I'm the leader, because the I that I grasp onto is that churning mind. There is another possibility, and it's this possibility of reverence and receptivity. How do we do that? That's the question that Subhuti is asking. And the Buddha then, I'll just read it. The Buddha said, "Excellent, excellent Subhuti. It is as you have said. The Tathagata is ever mindful of bodhisattvas, protecting and instructing them well. Now listen attentively, and I shall explain it for you. good men and good women who resolve to attain the unsurpassed complete enlightenment should thus abide and subdue their thoughts. The Venerable Subhuti said, yes, world-honored one. We are listening with great anticipation. And then the Buddha gives him the instruction. Excellent, excellent, Subhuti. So I'd just like to encourage you to think about this conundrum of fabrication, of the use of your own power and the use of your own will, and how there is this tendency to just either give up and recede and be mowed over, or to make what it is that we want to happen, and we're in this kind of struggle between the two. And that this teaching is telling us we don't have to live in that struggle. There's another possibility. So you've got to get really familiar with that conundrum of that wall that you know you have to face, but is basically impossible to face. And from that place, then the receptivity to the teachings can be possible. And we'll find as the Buddha starts to explain how is it that you do this subduing of the mind and finding it is where you should live or how you should live. He gives an answer that throws us right back on the wall. So you want to get quite familiar with that as you continue to study the Diamond Sutra. Any questions or?
This is something that I've been questioning recently. I've been playing basketball consistently for over 10 years, and it's just become very important to me. You could say it's part of my identity. This Zen practice is very new to me, and I just when I'm playing, it seems to come natural that if I'm playing with people and it's a closer game, there might be some trash talk involved.
Yeah.
Right? And so even if I don't exactly speak it out loud, I might, if somebody's trash talking me, I might throw myself into, like a little harder into their body to score. Or I might, a pump fake, or a shot fake. I'm literally lying to them with my whole body. And if they fall for it, once or twice, I might, run back down and say, oh, how stupid of them. So I'm just, how can it coexist, that part of me?
Yeah.
Because that is important.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what you have to say.
Yeah, rock on, man. I think there's something about games which is really great. My children used to get really frustrated with me because we would play games. I would usually cheat, and then they would be like, "You're cheating." I'd be like, "But you didn't catch me, so that's part of the game, right?" Or they'd show you the cards or whatever. I didn't always cheat, but I did a lot. Anyway, I think there's something about a game which is super healthy, and it's where you delineate the playing field and what is the activity that we're engaged in together. So I think the place to watch is what can you leave in the court and what can't you leave on the court? How does the kind of aggression that is very appropriate on the court, how is that in the rest of your life? To be up against the kind of aggression that comes from competitive sports, I think is something that's really helpful. Because a lot of us, especially in the Buddhist world, we play this sort of contentment game, like, oh, we're so groovy and everything's fine, but we don't ever deal with real aggression. We just scoot it. We just kind of scoot around it. I remember when I was in a community, I won't say exactly where, and there was somebody who was just being really kind of abusive, like verbally abusive, and everyone's frozen. Now, if you had some basketball players there that were used to, the situation, they might have been like, "Shut up," right? But no one knew. They were just frozen in their kindness, and this person needed restrained, but there was nobody there to do the restraining because everybody was sort of blissed out or whatever. So I think that the facing that kind of aggression, as long as we can put some some guardrails around it, and watch when it breaks. In Japanese there's a term called yaburi dojo. It comes from martial arts, and in a martial arts sort of situation, you really have to get this straight, because if you don't, people get broken, right? So you've got to have these agreements on the mat, exactly, etc. But there can be a time when something goes off, and yaburi means to rip, like a ripped dojo. And if someone recognizes that, they need to call it out, and then everyone needs to stop. That's how it would be in a martial arts situation, because you know someone's going to get hurt. I think in basketball and things like that, probably the stopping everything doesn't happen. Probably being like, oh yeah, that guy's a jerk, or that guy's stupid, probably a little yaburi dojo, right? Like to actually think the guy's stupid, right? And so I think there's all those little places you can watch. But to fake someone out in a game, hallelujah, right? And to if how does aggression meet aggression, and how you use your body in that situation, etc. I think is all a study that we really need. So I wouldn't, I think there is a bit of an issue particularly in Western Buddhism, that we have this kind of image of being saintly, and we think that that's what we're supposed to do to be Buddhist. And there's also a lot of nitty-gritty stuff that needs to happen, and I think basketball is a great way to explore that. And then you become a leader. When you're able to be the person who can turn, can say, "Whoa, time out! I think we're missing the boat here, guys." Why is this? Why are these people almost punching each other in the face over some disagreement or whatever? That's not what we're here to do. Then you become a caretaker of the whole situation because you know where the boundaries are. But that takes a lot of work. Mm-hmm.
A long time ago, I found out the meaning of the word sarcasm, which is to cut flesh. And that really struck me as being, given that I grew up in a kettle of sarcasm. And I just went back and visited it. So my question is, how would the Buddha advise me to deal with sarcasm?
Yeah. So sarcasm carries pain this direction as well as that direction. So it sounds to me like you've tuned into the pain that comes this direction, that the flesh cutting is not only outward flesh cutting, it's also inward flesh cutting. And when we know that, then we can start to realize where the sarcasm is. At the first, we don't even really realize we're being sarcastic. And then as we start to clue into the pain that it's causing others and ourselves, then we start even seeing what it is. Then the work of facing the karmic pattern, or the habit energy, sometimes people call it, that's then this deep, thoroughgoing work where we see it, we see the sarcasm, we feel it, and then we go, okay, what's going on? Why now? Why this situation? Did it just jump out because I'm just sort of used to doing that, or was there something else underneath it that I'm protecting with the sarcasm? The sarcasm in particular, I'd say, oftentimes has a well of things it's protecting. And then we, if we've externalized the sarcasm, we make amends. And in the making amends, it doesn't only go that way; it has to go this way too. And when it goes this way, we have to work on unclenching whatever is clenched that allowed the sarcasm to take the lead, so to speak.
And the response to the other's sarcasm.
Yeah.
Is just to know that it's coming from pain.
Yeah, I would say. So for me, I think with the sarcasm, and I grew up with plenty of sarcasm, and I think there's a way in which sometimes it's just a way of like what's irony and what's sarcasm. Sometimes it can be kind of a funny line between it. And Japanese people don't really do irony, so when I lived in Japan, I was running into that. Like you say, like I remember I was at my teacher's temple one time, and they had these big metal shutters on the front gate, which I always just thought were hilarious. And we were shutting the metal shutters one evening, and I said to my Dharma brother's wife, we were shutting them together, I said, well, if a bus were to drive into the front of the gate, there'd be no problem now, which I thought was ironic, you know, because the doors are these big metal doors or whatever. And she just looked at me like, what are you there's a bus that's coming? So I think that there's a side of kind of irony, which isn't sarcasm, but there's this line that just kind of goes between them. So I don't think we need to be too holier than thou about it, but feeling that place where the pain is, and especially when it cuts. The main way that I work with it is the way that I work with a child that is being kind of like using a tantrum or some kind of throwing a fit to get what they want. Just don't remove attention, but don't react. And that can be very disarming for people who are using sarcasm to navigate a situation. But if you're just like, what's next? And oftentimes I find that will open up something. And then the person might say, oh, I didn't mean to, da-da-da-da-da. Or their own kind of suffering, and the thing will come forward in some way. But that's usually the way that I face it. I don't want to. It's one of those things where if you touch it and you try to fix it, you get wrapped up in it. You get wrapped up in that very quickly. So, but the being present, but not reactive, is very different than removing attention. Because the removing attention just becomes kind of like disassociation of some kind. So you want to stay present with it and caring, but not buying into the struggle. It'd be like if someone reached over and poked you in a kind of mean way. Poking them back is not so helpful. If you've got the fortitude to not just run away, if you've got this, sometimes you should run away. That would be the right response. But if you have the ability to just stay there, staying present. What's going on?
So just one?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about this difference between being overwhelmed versus self-righteous in the context of the almsgiving in that scene. And for me, like how easy it feels to put something in the Buddha's bowl, how easy it feels to put something in Buddha I's bowl, and then these other bowls where that trust isn't there. And so like my current vein is like, my job is to do due diligence and find the bowls that I more or less trust and put something in there. And yet I have this uncertainty of like that distrust and being undiscriminating about my bowls, and I have this hunch too that even in the context of the Buddha, like I'm thinking of a monk when I was in Thailand that was sort of imploring me to give a certain amount of money for a computer. Right, so I guess just your wisdom about how are we choosing bowls versus just putting it in whatever bowl.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, there's a very interesting exchange between Dogen Zenji and a questioner that's in some of you have studied before. There's a text called the Shobo Genzo Zui Monki, which is basically people asking Dogen Zenji questions and him giving answers. And one of the questions is about monks that don't follow the precepts. And Dogen Zenji gives this very sharp answer where he says, you should give alms to all monks, whether they follow the precepts or not. And he makes this strong case. It's a little self-serving, being a monk himself. But he makes this very strong case that it is the divisive mind of the almsgiver which this person should be paying attention to, as opposed to the behavior of the monk. And the reason that I'm bringing it up here is everything that is, constructed, everything that appears to us, whether it's an image of the perfect Buddha or a community, etc., it is fallible in its own way. And so the trust, the 100% trust that we want to have is not going to be located within the kind of like are they doing everything the way that I think they should be doing it? And I've got this monk who's like, give me this $1,000 donation so I can buy this laptop. That sounds a little fishy, right? You know, it's like it's supposed to be an empty bowl, not a bowl with like a slip at the bottom of it, or I'm selling you the computer so you can put it in my bowl. You know, so I get it. It's kind of fishy, but that everything is fishy to a certain extent, and that there's this shift in the generosity, which is a generosity about investing in what we really do believe in, not in that thing's capacity to carry it out. Because that's usually what we're doing. We're hanging it. Is this thing doing what I want it to do or not do it? And then if I'm supporting it, then I'm expecting it's going to do what I think that I want it to do. So I think that's an initial rearrangement. That if we just say, look, I have a certain amount of resources and I want to practice generosity with them, that needs to be the starting place. And that the generosity is the practice. From there, then the discernment about, okay, where am I going to put it? Because I don't have enough resources to put it in all of the bowls. There's certain places, and if we think about the bowls as being anything in our life, and it's not just about material assets, it's also about our energy, and that's what I hear in your question. Like, what do I put my energy into? Everything. Then if generosity comes on the first level, then we're simply looking for the thing where there's truly an empty bowl. Not a bowl of expectation. Not a bowl of the sales pitch. Right? And nothing's going to appear to you that way in 100% probably purity, maybe with the exception of your children. They're still young. And maybe your husband. But that's what we're trying to feel for. What is the real truth of this thing? And then I'm putting my resources into that, regardless of what the bowl's made out of, or who's holding it, or even what happens to those resources after I make the investment. And so that's a little different than kind of lining up and figuring out what's the best one, who's the good monk, who's the bad monk, which one I'm going to put into. It's more like first think about the generosity and the sharing, and then think about what corresponds with that. I was at my son-in-law was very happy with me when we were in Hiroshima Harajuku a few years ago in Tokyo. It's a very crowded place. People like to go on Sundays. It's where the dancing used to happen in Tokyo. Have you ever heard about that? These people dress up like they were in the 50s and they would dance. Anyway, we were going through the station, and there was a kind of monk there, and it was obvious to me that he had found a kesa, and he had found the proper marks that would make people think that he was a monk. And then he had a bowl, and he was going around to people and saying, well, you need to give me money, you need to give me money, you need to give me money. It was very aggressive. Mm-hmm. And I was just dressed as Dad that day, and he came and said something to me, and I really laid into him. I said, do you even know what you're doing? Mm-hmm. And so my son-in-law, it was nice. I don't always get to impress my son-in-law. So I felt good about that. But the reason that I did that in that moment was because I felt like he was coming forward with a kind of defilement of the understanding of what that bowl was about. So I'm not proposing that the generosity is always just stay on the side that feels good of the generosity and don't pay attention to the part where you have a judgment about something, but take the generosity first. And then say, what's the bowl that corresponds with that generosity? And as you're making the offering, don't worry too much about the judgment. Just follow that thing. But there may be bowls that come that you're like, no, I don't trust that bowl. Or that you might even be like, hey, what are you talking about? This isn't right. Anyway, I'm not sure that's a complete answer, but some musings. Yeah.
Oh, just one?
Uh-huh.
Speaking of giving up kind of makes me think of a time when I was kind of pondering the difference between giving up, which felt like quitting, and giving in, which felt like surrender to my own powerlessness in a situation.
Yeah.
So I could, let the current carry me so I could catch my breath and figure out what was coming at me and deal with it. So I'm kind of wondering what you might have to say about that surrender to powerlessness, because you were talking about sitting in your own power.
Yeah.
And it feels like there is a power in that powerlessness.
Yeah.
When you give in.
Yeah. One of the places that the power is coming from when we give in is we stop trying to contain everything. And for those of you who are taking the Zazen course on Thursday evenings, I'm going to talk a bit about this in that course. But one of the things that we're doing all the time in our sort of grasping of a self and in relationship with objects is we kind of think of ourselves as a container. Like I have power or I don't have power. Now, there are power relationships, and in some specific qualities, like say physical domination, you might have very little power and another person has a lot of power. That's very different than saying this person is the container of power and I am the container of the lack of power. When we start to think that way, then all of the possibilities in the situation go away. We're just locked into being a container for a lack of power or a container for powerlessness. Actually, when we recognize, oh, this is a situation or this is the relational situation, I'm not contained within something, there are all kinds of options that happen in that moment. And a lot of the options point us towards the path. They point us towards a way which is not about dealing in power, but is about our own, our own conviction in the mirror or in the jewel. That I'm going to buy into the struggle of the situation. I have something else that can happen. So this is why in the morning we chant the Avalokiteshvara chapter of the Lotus Sutra, in which it has this long list. You know, if you're thrown off the top of a mountain, then if you mindfully appeal to Avalokiteshvara, you'll hang like the sun in the sky. That's what the sutra says. So that mindful invoking of Avalokiteshvara's power is not the power that is like in opposition to something else that has a lot of power. It's like how do you go forward on the path? So I was really early on we didn't chant that sutra, and then we just didn't have enough time in the morning, and as time went on we added that. It's a traditional sutra to chant in the morning, and I was surprised by how many people adore that sutra. And then one thing I reflected on is that why did I not adore that sutra? It was pretty obvious. White, large, male, outgoing, lots of yang energy, dad, grandpa, but Abbot, all of those kinds of places where my own efficacy I'm assured of. But I can guarantee you this, that even if you're a person with that kind of persona, your own efficacy doesn't get you there. It actually will take you longer. It's harder, or not more arduous, but just you're more likely to not actually trust something other than your own ability. And so for me, that sutra has been teaching me in that way. It's like, of course you think you can do it, Ejo. That's why the empty bowl becomes so important.
I have an announcement. There are a couple of spots left in the class of Lojong teachings on compassion and loving kindness, and which begins September 16th at 6:30 to 8:30, and that's coming this Tuesday. So there is a book recommended. We had a few, but I haven't checked if there are any left. If you have any questions, I'm here. You can ask me questions, or there are little posters available as well. Thank you.
I have a quick announcement. My name is Shuho and Jushin up here in the front, and I welcomed you to the temple today. I know we have several newer people today, so if you have a question, come see one of us, and we'll do our best to answer it, or we'll connect you to somebody who can. Thank you.
My name is Joe Shane. I just want to make an announcement about, it was said so many times in the Diamond Sutra today about begging bowl being out there. We refer to them as Dana bowls here, and everything here is offered freely. From the Shanae's asking that you register for that course, but there's nothing is charged here for the temple. So appreciate everybody for sharing the generosity of sharing their names earlier today. If you feel called to share financial resources or your time to the temple. Financially, there are the Dana bowls are on the Gawa or in the front room, and there's all sorts of opportunities for you to share your time here as well. So thank you for your generosity.
Sanzen times are posted on the Abbot's gate, and there's also practice discussion times with, I think we have seven teachers besides myself at the temple, so if you're ever wanting to confer